I'm doing a quick video on cortisol. So cortisol, if you're a woman in perimenopause or menopause, depending on your age, cortisol probably maybe has gotten a bad rap from you. And the reason is because when our bodies increasingly use cortisol to keep us in a survival state or keep us in a fight or flight, because of stress, whether that stress is mental, emotional, or physiological, it creates problems that increasingly gradually get worse over time. And those problems usually begin to manifest in a bad and big uncomfortable way for women in perimenopause and menopause. So, but cortisol is necessary. And I want to talk about how healthy cortisol works in the body. So healthy cortisol is related to awakeness, and ideally our body uses cortisol or produces cortisol in the morning hours, and that's the hormone that tells our body to wake up, to have energy, to sustain us throughout the day. The problem is that what most people in modern society experience is a cortisol spike. And there's a difference between a cortisol spike or surge versus the natural rhythm of the body. The way the body's designed is to be able to have a slow, gradual increase in cortisol upon waking. And so when someone wakes up, so there's certain things that are going to cause your cortisol to spike, and there's certain things that support gradual elevation of cortisol in the morning. What I want to talk about is what causes cortisol spikes. So when we wake up in the morning, if we look at our device in the morning, so let me back up. What causes cortisol to come on board or to activate in the morning or when it's time to wake up is light. Light has a primary influence on cortisol levels increasing. So when we wake up in the morning, if we go directly outside and receive the morning light of the sun rising in the sky, that is a full spectrum of light that allows information to travel from the light into our eyes to a place by the hypothalamus of the brain that's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And that suprachiasmatic nucleus takes that information and speaks to the trillions of cells in our bodies, that gives our organs messages and certain precursors to hormones that tells our body it's time to wake up, it's time to start the day. So when that type of light is very therapeutic for the body, not only is the light therapeutic for the body, but going outside and standing and making a connection with Earth, with your human body, that also allows for your body to wake up in a grounded electrical state. And this allows your body to not go into the fight or flight. The fight or flight part of your nervous system is your survival instinct. It's when you're trying to survive or fight for your life. It's like when you're being chased by a bear, okay, you're either gonna stand strong and fight the bear or you're gonna run. And the way that you're gonna have the energy to run or to fight is a surge and a spike in cortisol and adrenaline to help you keep going. So that's not what we're looking for when we first wake up in the morning. We're looking for a slow, steady increase in cortisol. So ideally, that is how we obtain that slow, steady increase in cortisol, is by when we wake up in the morning, we immediately go outside and receive a full spectrum of natural light in our eyes and on our skin. Now I'll talk about how the opposite of that and what causes cortisol to spike in the morning. And then I'm going to explain to you the consequences of cortisol spikes in the morning. So cortisol spiking in the morning is achieved by waking up and reaching over and putting your electronic device in your face. Why? Because light is the primary signal that turns your cortisol on or off. And the light that comes out of your phone is not a full spectrum of light. It actually is rich and primary of the blue light. So it's artificial blue light that's coming through, and it's sending a signal through your eyes to the SCN that's saying it is the middle of the day in July. This type of bright light, okay, gives this signal to our body. And what that does is it causes our cortisol levels to rise up, because this type of light, when you first wake up in the morning, is actually a stress to your body. And the relationship that artificial blue light has that comes through your device, actually the relationship that it has with cortisol is that it causes it to spike. Then couple that morning routine habit of looking at the device is rolling out of bed with the device and drinking a cup of coffee. Coffee has caffeine in it, and caffeine naturally raises cortisol levels. You do that on an empty stomach, and you have an even higher level of cortisol. So what happens is when you take in the caffeine, it suppresses your appetite, which is going to more likely than not cause you to eat later in the day. And so let's see, that is the primary thing that will spike your cortisol in the morning. Now, skipping breakfast also spikes your cortisol because you've been sleeping at night, okay, which is like a fast. So your body is in fasting mode when you wake up. Breakfast breaks that fast. But when we skip breakfast, okay, and we're adding stimulants, as in the light from our phone and the caffeine in the coffee, and not to mention if we're checking emails or checking deadlines or throwing kids on a school bus or rushing them to school, we have not only this physiological stress that's happening, but the emotional and the psychosocial stress that is also contributing to elevated cortisol, not the gradual rise in cortisol, but spikes in cortisol. So the consequences of this, okay, is that whenever cortisol spikes, so does your blood sugar. So, and whatever comes up must come down. So what happens is that you're having these cortisol spikes followed by blood sugar spikes. Basically, your body is in a survival state like it's being chased by a bear. That's not how our body was designed to operate. So this leads to greater consequences living like this, and having these habits that are not sustainable to life catch up with you later in life, with us as humans. So women will start to see changes in their body in their mid-30s, late 30s, 40s to 50s, where they'll start gaining weight. Their moods will be thrown off, their energy will be thrown off, and this is all directly correlated. The hormones are thrown off, okay, to a negative light environment and the morning routine. Because what happens is gradually over time, as you're having these cortisol spikes and blood sugar spikes, when your blood is saturated with sugar, it can damage your arteries and blood vessels. That's what later on in life, the outcome is called diabetes, and it's damaging. So the body's mechanism in order to deal with elevated blood sugar is your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin is a hormone that goes, okay, so the blood sugar's got to go somewhere. It can either be, sugar's either used for energy through the muscles, or the sugar, remember, the sugar is now elevated because the cortisol is elevated. So you have this blood sugar in your body, because if we were in the cave days and we were being chased by a bear, we would need all this extra energy in our bloodstream to either fight the bear or run away from the bear. We'd be using a lot of energy. But in today's modern day society, we're just like waking up for the day. We're just having our cup of coffee and reading emails. We're not using this blood sugar to fight or fight for our life or run from a bear. So the other option of all that sugar staying in your blood vessels is that it has to go somewhere, so it's going to go into your cells to be stored as fat for later, when you might need it later. So what happens is that your body over time is doing its best to maintain homeostasis. Every time your cortisol spikes, your blood sugar spikes, and then your body, through your pancreas, releases insulin. Insulin goes to those cells. Remember, we said if you're not using the blood sugar, then it has to be stored in the cells. So your cells have a lock, and the insulin is the key. The insulin goes to the cell, unlocks it, the cell opens up, and the blood sugar goes in the cells to be stored as fat for later. So what happens is over time, our bodies are not designed to be flooded with this hormone called insulin. But insulin the pancreas is determined to do its job, because we keep having these cortisol spikes and these blood sugar spikes. And the body knows that the blood sugar can't stay in the blood vessels, so it's got to go in the cells. Well, what happens is that your cells, our cells, they kind of get, perturbed, and they're like, we're tired of opening up for all this sugar, and they get numb to the insulin. And that's when you start developing insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is when it takes more, so the cell with, the body's releasing insulin to open the cell. Great, everything's good, 20s, 30s, okay? But then, once the cells get tired, okay, the insulin's going to be there, and guess what? The cell's not opening. So the body's going to release more insulin, and those cells get more and more sluggish over time. That is where the term insulin resistance comes from. Now, the sad part about this is that I'm a registered nurse, and no time in nursing school did we learn about insulin resistance. Okay, so here, I'll bring this back home. This is how I came across this information as I self-studied, because when you go to a doctor and you tell them that your, hormones are acting up and that you're gaining weight and something feels off and you're having mood swings and hot flashes and your energy's not right and all these things, one test that they do to test for diabetes is your A1C. That is a measure of glucose, okay? That's a measure of glucose spikes over 3 months' time. It's the average. So they never test you for insulin. And so you can have a normal A1C that slowly will gradually get you to the pre-diabetes status or a diabetes status. But in the meantime, in the background, you have insulin resistance getting worse and worse and worse, and the doctors tell you to take birth control or an antidepressant to fix it. Now, women, y'all know I'm talking to you because this is relatable, right? I know it's relatable because I know so many women that have been on this path and this journey. So, men, this happens with y'all too. You start getting, a sign of cortisol spikes over time is going to be a rubber tire. You start to accumulate fat, visceral fat, like a rubber tire, okay? And so this is the issue with cortisol. This is the issue that we have with blood sugar, with morning light, with drinking coffee, and with not eating breakfast. Because, see, let me get back to the breakfast part, and then I'm going to be stopping this because I don't want it to go too long. But the breakfast component is, okay, we have all of this stress happening right when we wake up. We're having a cortisol spike because the lighting is off in our house. We have a cortisol spike because we're chugging coffee. We have a cortisol spike because the kids are arguing and we're trying to get them on the bus or to school, or we don't want to be late for work, or we're waking up and looking at emails. So all of this physiological stress, you may be somebody that says, I've been doing this routine, like I got it, I'm not stressed out. Well, you may not perceive that you're stressed out, but there is such thing as called physiological stress. And when you're having these cortisol spikes, that's a physiological stress, okay? And it puts you in fight or flight in your nervous system. So then you add the component of breakfast. When you've been fasting all night, your body, fasting is autophagy. It's where it's eating itself because you're not feeding it, right? So it's like a cleansing process. Well, fasting for too long or doing something at the wrong time in the wrong environment, something that's good can actually be bad. So for someone who's living the high stress life through the lens of spiked cortisol, skipping breakfast is a bad idea. Or eating breakfast that's high in carbohydrates, because you don't need anything else contributing to this cortisol and this blood sugar spike. What happens is when you eat a breakfast in protein, high in animal protein and fat, within 30 minutes to an hour of waking up, that food comes as nourishment, and it settles your nervous system, because it's giving, besides the information that comes through the sunlight and connecting with the earth, it's giving your body this information of nourishment, of like, okay, we're safe. It's kind of grounding you in your body and letting your body know, like, we're not in starvation mode. Think about it like in the cave days, okay? Like if we had to actually go hunt for our food or harvest our food, our body would kick in because we don't have a refrigerator full of food, and it would tell our bodies, like, it would kick our bodies into fight or flight to give us that oomph, that go ahead, like go freaking find some food to eat. So, but when we eat the food, then we're grounding back into our body. Also, if we can avoid that cortisol and that blood sugar spike, then we can maintain stable blood sugar levels, okay? Stable blood sugar levels. When we have a spike that requires insulin and brings it down harshly, that can create a heightened appetite. So if you're a woman in perimenopause or menopause, if you're a young woman that's having high stress and you feel like you're hungry all the time, or you get a ravenous appetite at night, I want you to ask, am I eating a solid breakfast in the morning? And am I eating enough during the day? Because what tends to happen is we're running high on fumes and caffeine throughout the day, or cortisol, stress hormones, and adrenaline. And then when the nighttime comes, it kind of catches up with us, which I'm going to do another video about melatonin and cortisol spikes with your evening routine and how to avoid that and how to support melatonin production. Then I'll do another video bringing it all together. But this is what I'm talking about is foundational health 101. And, you know, no medication, no supplement, none of that is going to align our bodies back to equilibrium and harmony. We will be surviving health instead of thriving in health. So if your goal is to thrive in health, stay tuned because I'll be sharing more.